right, a last few people are coming in the door, so I'll talk slowly as they find their seats. Thanks everybody for coming back for the second half of our Phoenix Kingdom Symposium. It really is heartening to see so many people out on a Sunday for all of these talks. The morning was very interesting and the afternoon promises to be exciting as well. Our two speakers for the first session this afternoon are Haicheng Wang, Professor of Art History at the University of Washington, and Guolong Lai, Professor of Liberal Arts at Westlake University. So, without further ado, Haicheng Wang.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Jay didn't want me to repeat what I said in the catalog, and he assigned me this topic, and I was very happy to oblige because I haven't met a single literary person who isn't interested in writing. Writing was invented in several different places in the ancient world, in several different contexts of use. In Mesopotamia, it arose from bookkeeping. And in Egypt, it appeared in royal contexts. And in Mesoamerica, it may have developed from religious imagery. In China, where we have as yet no trace of really early stages, we can't see. Now, the first beautiful writing appeared in Mesopotamian bookkeeping, in the work of proud scribes whose advancement as well as personal satisfaction depended on their handwriting. This tablet from about 2600 BC is only a list of farmers' fields. It's much handsomer than it needed to be. Beautiful writing became a necessity only when rulers saw that it could serve their interests, above all their interests in the legitimation of power and hierarchy. And this happened in all four of the civilizations I just mentioned, regardless of the context in which writing was first invented. After a few centuries of bookkeeping, the Mesopotamian system was extended to write phrases and even sentences. And the first application of the expanded system was captioning images of gods and kings. This figure of a bullman from early 3rd millennium Mesopotamia is captioned below his shoulder. And 2,000 years later, in the palace of the Assyrian king Ashurnasirpal, writing was still captioning images. These captions run continuously around the rooms, listing the king's titles and epithets and great deeds, whispering his glories, from all the walls. The writing was added only after the sculptors had finished their work, and it runs indifferently over figures and background. To us, this separation of writing and image seems natural. The illustrations in our books and magazines are separate from the text they accompany, but it was not inevitable. It owes something to the fact that the Mesopotamian captions and images never had a visual connection between the two. And some signs of the earliest bookkeeping were little pictures, but when the signs were streamlined for easier and easier writing, their pictorial content evaporated. And this happened well before they were employed to caption images. Like the letters of our alphabet, cuneiform signs did not make the user think of pictures. Now, things happen differently in writing systems that use pictorial signs. As in Mesopotamia, the first function of beautiful writing in Egypt and Mesoamerica seems to have been the captioning of images of gods and kings. Here, around 3000 BC, an Egyptian king named Namr is triumphing over enemies. His caption is above him. It's his name, written with two hieroglyphs that depict a catfish and a chisel. To tell us that the hieroglyphs are a king's name, they are put inside a square sign that depicts the facade of a palace. Notice that Namr himself looks like a hieroglyph, and that is deliberate. It gives him something of the timelessness of a written word. Writing and pictorial art are fused in Egyptian royal display, and the combination has an astonishing range of artistic possibilities. Let me skip down about 1700 years to show you a striking example. Almost everything you see here is simultaneously a written word and a component of an image. A very long essay by a very expert Egyptologist would be required to explain everything that's going on in this design. Its designer was a high official or priest who had both the intellectual sophistication and the artistry to create something that communicates in a very complex way, visually and verbally at the same time. It's neither an inscription nor a picture. It's framed at the top and sides by a long, thin hieroglyphs. The one at the top means sky. The two that hold up the sky signifying the king's power. Now, the sky is also studded with stars, and hieroglyphs for power depicts a scepter. No alphabet can do this. The hieroglyphic script remained in use on monuments for more than 3,000 years because royal display depended on its fusion of writing and pictorial art. But hieroglyphic is not good for doing bookkeeping or taking lecture notes. For everyday purposes, another script was devised, a cursive script. And this artist was a master of hieroglyphic, but he will have done most of his writing in hieratic, a cursive script. And most members of the elite wrote only in hieratic. The scribal artists of Maya hieroglyphic found similar possibilities in their script. And again, one of the basic functions of beautiful writing was captioning. This is a stone relief dated to AD 783. The king of Yaxchilan sits on a throne that consists of his names and titles, and the label to his right names his lieutenant general, who is presenting him with 3 animal nobles he has taken prisoners. The prisoners are also captioned. And the inscription to the left of the officer here names the sculptor who carved the relief, a man named something like Mo Yu. A carver who was permitted to display his name next to the king's must have had great prestige. And many Maya monuments are signed by their carvers. Captions are a regular feature of finely painted drinking cups too, and 17 signed examples are known. As in China, writing and painting were done with the same instrument, and a single hieroglyph embraces both. 3 of the signed cups are from the hand of a painter who has the title Lord, implying that he is a member of the royal ruling family. A signature that includes a princely title suggests that writing and painting were respectable activities even for men born with high status. Like the scene with prisoners, this is display writing. Everyday writing was not done in hieroglyphic. No actual example of Maya cursive has ever been found, but paintings show scribes writing on perishable materials such as banana leaves. As I now turn to China, I will focus on early inscriptions to establish some parallels and contrasts with the other early civilizations. I won't be able to carry the story of beautiful writing down to the time of the Phoenix Kingdom exhibition, but I will conclude with two examples from that time as a way of suggesting that the story did not end at the point where I must stop. The oldest writing we have from China takes the form of display inscriptions from about 1200 BC, probably several centuries after the invention of writing. This one is a royal divination carved on a bone that made the divinations. And this one is on the inside wall of a bronze container for ritual offerings of wine. It's an elegantly designed monogram that identifies the owner of the vessel. Handsome, but kind of hard to decipher. Some of its components are more pictorial than they would be in the oracle bone script or in everyday writing. So we see an eye above a standing figure and a spray of bamboo. Pictures disappeared from the Chinese script fairly early, just as they disappeared from Mesopotamian cuneiform. But the designers of the bronze inscriptions knew what lay behind the character forms, and they sometimes played with what they knew. This inscription is from about 1100 BC. This one, from about the same time, dedicates a food vessel to the ancestor who received the food. In one respect, it differs fundamentally from Egyptian, Mesopotamia, and Maya display inscriptions. This is not a caption to an image. The Chinese writing system arose in a culture that was not heavily invested in representational art. Captioning was not one of its functions because there was nothing to caption. We have no picture of or statue of any named individual from ancient China, no picture of a king, no statue of a god. We only have the bronze vessels that were used to make offerings. Beautiful inscriptions dedicate the vessels, claim ownership of them, enhance the importance that's already manifest in their design, and sometimes borrow for mundane purposes the sanctity of the rituals they served. But the texts are never partnered with images of the people they mention. Instead, fine writing is itself the center of attention. This designer is playing with the script. The inscription inside the vessel is a perfectly normal identification of the owner. So he is the officer of boat. That's the character for boat. But take a good look at the decoration of the exterior. Let me show you a rubbing. Look at the white parts, the white lines. They say boat, 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 boat. I think this bronze belongs to the admiral of the fleet. Yeah. Now, from the first 8 centuries of Chinese writing, we have nothing but display inscriptions for the simple reason that everyday writing was not done on durable materials. But it's clear from indirect evidence that from the beginning, the medium of everyday writing was what you see here, brush and ink on wood and or bamboo slips. The slips were bound together with cords to keep them in order and to allow rolling a document up into a scroll. The document on the left comes from a well-preserved tomb of the 2nd century BC. The slips on the right date from about 300 BC. The oldest such slips yet known date from 433 BC. that has become an important date for us. They come from the tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng that Professor Bagley talked about this morning. But from the beginning, from the 13th century onward, the artists who designed display inscriptions were scribes who did most of their writing in ink on bamboo. They did not learn to write by carving bones and casting bronzes. What was habitual to them and what they learned as scribal apprentices was brush and ink writing on bamboo slips. When they designed and executed display inscriptions, their point of departure was everyday writing. On the left, you see a very exceptional divination bone that was inscribed in ink. Now, on the right, you see a character written for practice on a potsherd. The Chinese writing brush is held vertically like this, right? The line it makes widens and narrows as the brush is pressed more or less firmly against the writing surface. Individual strokes often begin with a sharp point where the tip of the brush was laid against the surface and end with another where the brush was lifted off. To control the brush as expertly as these two scribes did requires long practice. The oracle inscriptions were carved on a very hard surface. The carvers who executed them simplified the everyday script for easier execution. The abbreviated character structures cut uniform lines instead of modulated lines, favored straight lines over curves, and replaced solid dots with open squares. Next to the plump, fluid lines on the right, the carved lines look tense. But those characters are lucid and very well built. And close examination of the actual bone shows that the carver even managed to cut lines that are subtly shaped in somewhat the same way that a good Chinese writer today using a ballpoint pen can evoke the modulated line of the brush. Far from making do with legible scratches, this carver wrote a beautiful hand. The fact that the characters are inlaid with cinnabar confirms that this inscription was meant for display. For the bone carver, imitating the shape lines of brush writing was difficult, but special occasions might call for it. This is a hunting trophy. The Shang King killed an animal in a hunt and had one of its ribs inscribed for presentation to a subordinate. The lines were carved to resemble brush writing. They were even inlaid with carefully shaped particles of turquoise. Our sample of the earliest Chinese writing consists almost entirely of bone-carved inscriptions, but this object tells us that brush writing, real writing, was the prestige form of the script. Life was a lot easier for the artist writing an inscription for a bronze vessel. He didn't have to carve bronze. This inscription was cast in sunken line by a transfer process that started with a clay original. The scribe wrote the inscription with brush and ink on a slab of soft clay. Then a foundry worker excavated the inked parts of the clay to convert the inscription to sunken lines. On the left, you see a piece of clay from a foundry site from the 11th century BC. The next step was for a mold maker to take an impression from that to convert the characters to raised lines. So here is the sunken inscription. That's the raised inscription, and this is the core, the clay core of the casting mold. The core will form the interior of the bronze, and the clay impression was set into it. When the vessel was cast, the raised line inscription on the core produced the sunken line inscription inside the bronze. If the scribe wanted the bronze inscription to imitate bronze brush writing, he just wrote his original in ink on clay and told the mold maker to replicate it. But he didn't have to delicate the work in clay. Some scribes liked working directly in what was for them a new medium. In the right half of the inscription, the modulated lines look like bold, elegant brush writing. But in the left half, the lines of the framing device look like timbers. That frame looks, as architectural as the vessel itself. Designers working in soft clay could do anything they wanted, and this one, designing a logo, did a mix of things. Others might imitate the bone cover's uniform lines, but make them curve smoothly in a way the bone cover could not hope to. The thin lines and effortless curves of the inscription on the left are not natural to carving or to brush writing. These are the invention of a scribe experimenting with the possibilities of soft clay. Line quality is not the only thing that matters in display inscriptions. Character structure is important, the way characters are built, and so is the composition of whole inscriptions. This inscription is not much later than the previous ones, and it seems fairly close to brush writing. It reads in columns, top to bottom, right to left. The first column has 9 characters, the second has 7, the third has 11. The scribe was given a text written on bamboo slips, and he rewrote it in clay. On slips, each graph had to fit the width of the slip, but it could be as tall as necessary to set out its components legibly. The graphs on the bronze don't vary much in width, but they vary greatly in height. You can just compare this character and this character. Now let's compare the inscription with the one on the left. Both inscriptions are copying a text from bamboo slips to clay, and neither of them writes characters that align horizontally. The scribe on the right adjusted the size and spacing of the characters to make 3 equal columns. The character king occurs twice, here and there. Okay? He has written it small and large to suit the space. Beyond equalizing the columns, though, he didn't give much thought to the inscription as a whole. Now, but the scribe on the left gave a lot of thought to composition. He didn't get this result without writing many, many drafts. He crowded the text into a rectangle whose vertical and horizontal compactness erases all memory of bamboo slips. Pushing the columns together and packing the graphs into a rectangle sounds like a formula for disaster, but the columns are strictly vertical and the graphs are so stable and individual that their varying sizes do not confuse at all. Crowding only intensifies their impact. Now, this inscription dates from about 1000 BC, and it's royal. The ancestor receiving sacrifice was the brother of a king. Its composition was not produced by applying some formatting rule. It was arrived at by an artist who judged by eye, moving back and forth between the whole and its parts, shaping characters in tight relation to their neighbors. To do this with an inscription of 68 characters was a tour de force. To do it with 248 characters was surely impossible. The inscription on the right couldn't be composed by eye. Order had to be imposed. This was done by fitting each character into one rectangle of a grid. The result is vertical columns, horizontal rows, and mechanical spacing. That may sound easy and unimportant, but it was not at all easy, and it was fundamental. Carl Stanke, who is in the audience today, has shown us that the grid was in fact a watershed in the history of Chinese writing. For easier comparison, let me enlarge a bit of the inscription on the right. The scribe on the right did not have to design the composition. That was done by the grid. But he or some predecessor had to redesign every character of the writing system to fit the grid square. As you can see, the adoption of the grid radically changed the appearance of the script. Not only that, it changed the way Chinese characters have been conceived ever since. Children today learning to write practice on graded paper. Beginners are told that each character, whether it contains 1 stroke or 20, must command its square. And calligraphers practice on graded paper with the same precept in mind. Of course, once having learned to write, writers can abandon the grid. They can write characters that vary in size. They can even write cursive characters linked by strokes that continue from one to the next. But formal writing is done with characters of uniform size, like the characters in a printed book. In other words, the Chinese script was permanently reshaped by ancient scribes who used a grid to lay out lengthy bronze inscriptions. Ever since, the script has been imagined as having an essential form in which characters are all the same size, and all other forms are thought of as departure from it. But that inverse history. Before the 10th century BC, no inscription on bronze or bone had characters of equal size. On the right, also notice that those characters have no pictorial content that could be detected by an observer who has not been taught to see pictures in them. Egyptian hieroglyphics stayed pictorial, but the Chinese script, like Mesopotamian cuneiform, eliminated pictures for reasons of efficiency. On the left, I have jumped forward 400 years. That's a bell in the exhibition that belonged to a Marquis of Zheng. On modern practice paper, the grid units are squares, but the units in bronze inscriptions are often rectangles. And the inscription designers knew that changing the proportions of the rectangle could transform the look of the script. The characters on the left are extravagantly tall. Compare the character Wang there with the same character there. On the right is an inscription on a bell from Marquis Yi's tomb, 433 BC, about half a century later than the one on the left. It retains the tall proportions and thin, unmodulated lines, but the lines seem to be more willowy and dynamic. And most of Yi's bell inscriptions are inlaid with gold. 65 sonorous bells with 3,000 gold inlaid characters bombarded Marquis Yi's guests with his greatness. Display inscriptions are not meant to be ignored. I must end my story at this point, but the history of display inscriptions did not end here. On the contrary, as time went on, they became harder and harder to ignore, to overlook. Tang emperors carved them on mountainsides. From the moment of the earliest Chinese writing known us, there has never been a time when the script was not a focus of artistic invention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jade, for invitation, and for Jaina and the team to bring me here. So the topic of my presentation today is the so-called tomb guardian figure. In Chinese, zhenmushou. Here I add it on the screen. There's one, this actually we didn't bring, in the catalog we have one perfect example of the zhenmushou, but didn't come this time. But we can easily find one in Washington, D.C. in the National Asian Art Museum in Washington, D.C. This is one from Free and Sackler Museum. I added so-called because I don't believe this is a zhenmushou. So I think it's a misidentification. I argue in this presentation that the object is a symbol of fecundity deity, fertility god in early China. So the object appeared in Warring States southern tomb, particularly Chu tomb, quite often. It's oftentimes a square base, and on the square base there's a one or two straight necks. Some early ones only have one pole, and on top of this pole you have an animal head, and on top of the animal head there's sometimes one pair, sometimes two pair of antlers, real deer antlers. And some later one even have a human face. So this is a general form of what is so-called tomb guardian figure. In the past 70 years, we over 400 pieces, examples were discovered. And there's some are very abstract, some have zoomorphic features, and some even have anthropomorphic feature or hybrid form. So this is my plan. Based on bronze inscription that we discovered in the Hesangling tomb number 2 in Henan province, this object was identified as Zhu Si, which appeared in excavated divination and sacrificial record that was particularly preserved in Chu tomb. And in these documents, in these written sacrificial documents, it was called Zhu Wei. Then I need to answer the question, what is Zhu Wei or Zhu Si? I argue that Zhu Wei is the stand of Zhu, referring to stand of phallus, which is a symbolic representation of fecundity god in early China. And separately, I will do an archaeological typological study, see the evolution of this iconography from the early one to the later one. And we found this fecundity god developed from a phallus symbol to a zoomorphic and anthropomorphic and hybrid image. And the last question I need to answer is why a fecundity god was buried in tomb. So that's my plan. So first I'll review the scholarship. As Colin already mentioned, these type of objects, what is so-called zhenmushou, was discovered in 1930s. And it was studied by Japanese scholars, Mizuno Seiichi and Umehara Soeji, and the early Japanese art historians, archaeologists studied this. And the early one is by Mizuno Seiichi in 1937. He concluded this is the image of a mountain god or apotropic tomb guardian beast or tomb guardian figure. The real name of the deity is unknown. He couldn't identify, but it's functioned as a tomb guardian figure. So you could be any god who was guarding the tomb. That's his argument. So over the years, the various series of what's the identity of this deity. And in 1992, the Hubei scholar Zhang Jun wrote an article summarized altogether there's 11 theories about what exactly this deity is. It's a mountain god, avatar of evil, Earth Lord, dragon lead soul to the heavens, God of earth, you all sorts, or even a totem image. So there's all sorts of theory about this figure. And in Western scholarship, very early on, art historian Alfred Salmony wrote an article, wrote a small booklet, and in the Western literature was known as the antler and the tongue, because the characteristic of the tongue and the antler. This one is now in the British Museum. So this motif was called antler and tongue motif in Western literature. So there is a methodological problem. One of the Hubei scholar, Peng Hao, pointed out, if one try hard enough, it's not difficult to find some similarity between the object you refer to, this zhenmushou, and certain description of mythological figures. However, they're really lacking any substantial internal connection between them. So many times people, by free association, they look similar and they identify them. And in anthropological terms, so it's mainly this kind of association is external ethic observation, our modern people's observation of the object, and rather than internal emic perspective. So what, if we know what the true people call this object, so the best emic identification of the object, if we can find out how these early Chinese name this object, self-identification inscription on the object will provide us with direct clue. And indeed, we find one. This is in 1990. Henan archaeologist discovered a bronze base in the tomb number 2 of Heshangling in Sichuan from a Wei lineage cemetery. It's the late spring autumn period or early warring states period. And this is a bronze base, a pole, and on this area there's an inscription. And the inscription basically translated as this is an object called 主事. 主事 of the name so-and-so, a female tomb occupant's name, and from the middle branch of the Wei lineage, from the state of Zhen. So this is the Zhen woman married out to the Wei lineage, a very strong lineage, a very powerful lineage in the Chu kingdom. And this is only a bronze base. And why I said this is a tomb guardian figure, so-called tomb guardian figure, because archaeologists, that's the distribution of archaeological material excavated from that tomb number 2. Oftentimes in Chu tomb, there's a pair of tomb, the husband's tomb and a wife's tomb. And this tomb number 2 is the wife's tomb. So number 66 is the square base. And near the square base is the antler. And archaeologists and Professor Li Ling, my professor in Beida, when this was discovered, they looked very carefully. In this shelf, in this pole, there's fragments of rotten wood in it. So probably originally there's some kind of wooden sculpture on top of this. And on top of that wooden animal head or whatever sculpture, there is the antler. And the antler fought off, because of the wooden part was rotten. So the identification of this object, this bronze base, as a base for the so-called tomb guardian figure is secure. So now my question is, what is 主事? So there's also various interpretation of the 主事 inscription and the problem. Here I want to introduce a little bit about Chinese paleography. One of the big problems, there's a various interpretation of this. One of the problems that I worked in last 20 years in the field of Chinese archaeology is try to convince my Chinese colleagues to use new modern linguistic method to study Chinese paleography. Because in the traditional way of analyze Chinese phonology, there's a very vague. And after Calgren, we have a more precise, specific a method for doing that. So, for example, I'll just give one example. Zhao Ping'an, who is a scholar in Tsinghua University, he thinks this 主事 should be read as 晚期, because 晚期 is a name that appeared in received text and also in Qing and Han manuscript, is a deity who devoured ghosts. So that would be a very good case for tomb guardian figure, because they protecting the tomb and devouring a ghost. But philologically, that's just impossible. You cannot turn the 主事 into a 晚期 with early Chinese phonology. So I need to solve out what is this 主事. Actually, my argument is 主事 is a 主谓. So they are synonym. And actually, William Baxter, who is a Chinese linguist working on Old Chinese phonology, has an article on this reconstruction. So I'll just go as, so actually Old Chinese are in a way very different from modern or later Chinese. Old Chinese also have a case of grammatical inflections. It's actually, we have a prefix and a suffix. Here's an example that William Baxter discovered. This 主事 in modern reading 是, in Old Chinese reading like nets kind of sound. And another word is 社, net. So by adding an S into a verb, it's a nominalization suffix. So this is a new development in Chinese linguistics and Old Chinese phonology. And Bill Baxter find a very interesting example is in Han Fei Zi. Han Fei Zi, there's one passage, 无所言是者人之所设也，此自然之事非人之所得设也. The translation is the setup. This is a noun of which I'm speaking. Refer to what is set up. This is a verb by man. That's natural setup. It's a noun, not what is set up by man. So in Old Chinese, there are these type of S ending that nominalize a verb into a noun. And the same situation actually 主谓 and 立. 立 we know is standing, a verb, the place where I stand. 谓 is where I stand, the position, the place. And this is Bill Baxter and Laurent Sagat's new book on Old Chinese New Reconstruction. And I, with my Chinese colleagues, we have translated into Chinese. For that's actually for my Chinese colleagues. We want to use this new methodology. And so this my conclusion is 主事 is 主谓. They are synonym. So we have this kind of way, like tablet. This is the 5 tablet of 5 household deities that discovered in Baosan tomb number 1. In the famous the stove god, right, in later Chinese tradition, is this one. This is stove god's tablet. They are not. They are in abstract wooden tablet with writing on it. So now my question is, what is 主谓? I said 主谓 and 主 are same. And what is 主谓? We actually discovered 主谓 in Tianxingguan Chu manuscript, a divination and sacrificial record that were buried in tomb. And there, 主谓associated with a group of evil ghosts, like blameless dead and people who died of violence dead. They are the target of exorcism in early China. In Chinese, called 公解. So it's actually Yan Changhui, Wuhan Daxue scholar, worked on this. He thinks 主谓 is referred to the ancestor tablet. But my argument is that because associated with all these evil ghosts and blameless dead, they are not referred to the normal ancestor. In Baosan tomb number 1, we also find this referred to as 主 or 民主. Min just an adjective describe the bright, the bright, the luminous deity, and also 见目位. There's two ways of dealing with deities, dealing with spirit in traditional China. One is sacrifice. Sacrifice and pray often refer to ancestors because they are your relative in the spiritual world. So you have a blood connection with them. So you give them food and the good words, right? And another group another category of deity is those non-ancestral spirit, or sometimes evil spirit. And you use exorcism to try to get rid of them. So these are two ways of dealing with the spiritual world. And I also do some linguistic analysis, see the 见目位 actually is referred to the 主谓. There's Sandy involved in this. It's a little bit complicated. I will not go into the details. So here is the table is the Baosan tomb number 1, the divination and sacrificial record. The story in the Baosan tomb is the last 3 years of the tomb occupant. We actually know his name, Shao Tuo. He is an official in the Chu kingdom. And in last 3 years, he was ill. And every time they will ask the diviner, a group of diviner will help him find out who was the deity that caused Shao Tuo's illness. And when the diviner discovered, find out which one is, and then they sacrifice to them if they're the ancestor. If they are not non-ancestral spirit, they use 公解, they use the exorcism to try to get rid of them. And here they refer to 民主, 主, and 见目位. And this is very interesting. This last one is before Shao Tuo's death. Because oftentimes it's, he was ill, and the diviner identify the deity, they make a sacrifice, and he recover a little bit. So that's good, right? And he his illness become worse. And they ask for another, do another divination and find who was the evil spirit that caused. And 见目位 was one of the last one. And after this divination record, Shao Tuo died in 8 days later. And then we had his funeral. That's the sacrificial and divination and sacrificial record from Baosan tomb number 2. So now we know this is a symbolic representation of 主. So what exactly is 主if not ancestral spirit? So about this 主, there's interpretations. There's all sorts of interpretations. And one is it's a chopping board. Like we all know, like the Chinese cooking, right? You need the chopping board is the same sound. But actually, I think the correct interpretation here is a phallus. And this is Guolong Lai in 1929 and Cao Gun in 1930. They already talked about this. The Chinese 祖先的祖, it's actually a symbol of a phallus. It's actually, this is the 主, the words. And very similar to this jade tablet that we discovered in Shang Dynasty's tomb. On top of this writing is the ancestors' temple name, Zhu Gen, Zhu Jia, Zhu Bing, Chou Kui, Chou Xing. And this is just upside down. And this is very close. See, the Chinese writing of Zhu is a depiction of this jade tablet. And Li Ling has wrote an article about it. He collected all these phallus kind of symbol from Neolithic period down to the Warring States period. And it's very clear these are fecundity deity, fecundity god, fertility god that was very common because human reproduction is a very important part of the social development. So I want to do a typological study, see, collecting all these objects together and see how this developed. So this is a quote from a veteran of Zhu study, Professor John S. Major, who was also the contributor of our exhibition catalog. And there he said, one of the most, he was talking about the zhenmushou, the tomb guardian figure. One of the most striking characteristics of the antler and tongue motif is its obvious phallicism. The phallus could be a naturalistic depiction of an erect penis, but its symbolism can be displaced onto other features, such as protruding tongues, horns, and antlers. Symbolically, the point is not gender, but power. In the case of two antler and tongue figures, we seem to dealing with empowerment of demonic. But the figures themselves are not baleful, but rather apotropaic. They are, in short, demons or gods, harnessed or coerced to provide protection for the master of the tomb. He was still thinking about this object as a tomb guardian figure. But I think when I first read this passage, I don't believe him because I haven't gone into my study yet. But in hindsight, I think he's very insightful observation about this is phallicism. So I did a actually not me, many scholars have done this typological study from early period in the middle of spring, autumn period. There's only one base with a pole on it. And then gradually you have more attributes was added onto this symbol. And these are the earliest one from Dang Yang and Zhao Xiang. That's the early Chu example. It's just a wooden pole and a wooden base and with a pole on it. And the bronze cases are also most of them are made of wood, but there's also made of bronze and ceramic and lead figure. So actually, Professor Zhang Changping only first mentioned this. The bronze case was only discovered in elite woman's tomb. So that's actually given me lots of inspiration when I'm working on it. So it's gradually in Warring States period, they began to appear in male tomb or tomb we cannot identify the gender of tomb occupant. And these additional elements was added to the figure, like deer antler, protruding tongues, bulging eyes, human or animal faces. And why the deer antler was onto this figure? Because this type of deer called milu in China was extinct in China, in modern China, was later just reintroduced into China. It's called Pierre David's deer. And now there in China, there's a national natural reserve in Jiangsu, the group of deer. Every summer, these milu have these are very common, actually they're very common in ancient China, But in modern China, was reintroduced into China in modern periods. So there are 2 pair of antler per year. And the summer antlers are the largest set, and they drop off in November after the summer rut. The male deers are fighting each other for the group of female deers. So this is the king deer in May 2010. So these elements, additional elements, would add onto this, from the abstract single pole to a human face, just exactly as John S. Major, Professor Major, has suggested. So now my question is, why were fecundity gods buried in tomb? This is actually a universal phenomenon. When in graduate school, I read this book, Death and Regeneration in Life, and talk about, there's a classical anthropological paradox that symbols of rebirth and fertility are frequently found in funerary ritual throughout the world. For example, people talk about sex in ancient Egyptian tomb. And we have example, Bachhoff wrote an article, the essay on ancient mortuary symbolism, talk about in Etruscan art, there's an egg, there's a regeneration symbols. For example, this pair of couples, in their hand, original, there's an egg on their hand. And these are all the symbol of regeneration. So death and regeneration are very closely associated. So I think this probably was an object that used by this elite woman in her lifetime and buried in her tomb after her death. So why fecundity gods were buried in a tomb? That relates to early Chinese ancestor worship. So ancestor and descendants are mutually dependent. One cannot exist without other, right? In Chinese, if you don't have a descendant, you will no one sacrifice to the ancestor animal, you will become evil ghost. So from the deceased perspective, deceased need to continue pray to the fecundity god for the regeneration of the family to save themselves from becoming hungry ghosts. And from the perspective of the living, once the deceased ancestor become powerful spirits in the afterlife, in the other world, their blessing will be more efficacious. So the fecundity was in charge of not only fertility, but also human lifespan. So there's a parallel example in the Eastern Han bamboo, actually wooden slip. The same situation, and now in the Hong Kong University Art Museum collection. In the same case, a woman named Xu Ning, in her last years, in her last time before her death, the family did all sorts of ritual, sacrifice, exorcism, and there's one, the Qing Zise, and Qing Zise to pray that she will recover, but she didn't. So Qing Zi is for fertility, right? So the idea. So the Baoshan case is not the only case that before people, the dying people, they pray to fecundity god for recovery. So that's actually my whole plan. So based on the inscription excavated from Heshangling, I identified this 主事 and is 主位. And 主位refers to the stand, the symbol of 主. And this 主 is the fecundity god. From typological study of these over 400 examples, we see the evolution of from abstract pole to a more elaborate symbol. And why the fecundity god was buried in tomb is the Chinese ancestor worship in the afterlife. And this morning, there's a question from the audience about the boob trap in Egyptian art, right? So zhenmushou is kind of protecting the tomb. But my point is that fecundity god and tomb guardian figure, they belong to burial tradition. For the fecundity god was buried inside the vertical shaft pit tomb. And the tomb guardians, they are oftentimes outside of the tomb or on the entrance into. These two examples is from early Western Han Dynasty, also from Hunan. On the entrance, on the ramp leading to the tomb chamber, there's two human figure. And on top of them, originally, there's an antler. And these are the tomb guardian figure. Very different from the fecundity god that I'm talking about. We also find example in Henan, and this is actually from Ma Wang Dui, from the famous Ma Wang Dui tomb number 1 and number 2. They both have a human figure with antler on top of the head, and it was in the entrance leading to the tomb. So my argument is these type of what is so-called tomb guardian figure are very different from the medieval tomb guardian figure. So this is in the later period in the medieval period, you begin to have tomb guardian figure often is outside of the tomb chamber or on the passage leading to the tomb chamber. Thank you very much.
This question is for Professor Lai. Your hypothesis about the using the Old Chinese pronunciation is very interesting. But to me, there seems like a gap in the reasoning that I'm really confused about. So the example you gave is that the s suffix will turn a verb into a noun, right? Yes. The example you gave is the li, the grub. If you add an s to it, it grubs the way, right? And the other one, you want to explain the zhi and the she.
Yeah, shi and she.
Yeah, so the zhi would be the snats. Snats should be the noun, and
yes.
The corresponding verb should be snat. Snat is she.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and then you gave us some examples from the corpus that you can find a lot of like 主谓 examples, 主谓, right?
Yeah.
But wei is corresponding to li, not zhi, right? The one that corresponding to zhi should be she. So the example that will like
it's a parallel. Se and shi is a verb and noun. Li
yes.
and wei is a verb
and noun. Yes. So, yeah, but how can you link li and zhi?
Li and zhi have no relationship.
But
they are two verbs, so they are two different.
Li and wei is another example, right? One
yes.
is verb and one is noun, right?
Yes.
And the other pair is zhi and she, right?
She and zhi.
She and
she
zhi.
is the verb.
Yeah, so what's corresponding to 主治 should be 主社, not 主谓. What corresponding to 主谓 should be 主力.
No, the verb is not she. The inscription is shi. It's
yes.
not she. On the inscription is a noun. It's not a verb.
Oh, so the mapping is verb to verb and noun to noun,
yes.
right?
Yes.
But there are a lot of verbs. How can you pick like two verbs there? Yes, they both can add x suffix to it.
Yeah, I have a more philological examples to prove that.
Oh.
But for this presentation, I simplified.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, this is a very, very interesting hypothesis. Yeah, I will look more into it. Thanks for your answer.
There's one question over here.
Thank you both.
It's good.
Okay, I'm from the Freer. And thank you both for such informative lectures. Since I can only ask one question, I'm going to ask Professor Lai. You mentioned about this male sexual organ as a protective figure. In Hinduism, we know the lingam.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Do you find any association between the two of your hypothesis?
Yeah,
Thank
not
you.
direct association, but actually in in southern China, and basically, the migration of Asian continent is from north to south. So it's a very clear connection with many. For example, in Taiwan, also have same kind. There's lots of ethnographic evidence about that. Like when a new couple married, one of the when a new couple after their marriage, the woman should go to an altar to pray for 早生贵子, right? That's exactly fertility count in Chinese culture, and in many cultures in southern part, in South Asia and southern China. Yeah, there are lots of ethnographic evidence.
And since I said only 2 questions, that's 2 questions, but I have a question for Professor Wang. Sorry, you thought you were off the hook. No, and this may be a question out of utter naivete, but you gave us a wonderful demonstration of how script and types of script move from material to material, moving from brush script to incised bone script to eventually bronze script. Do we see the reverse happening as well with people? I mean, I'm thinking about contemporary artists who embrace the diversity of script styles and are looking to bronze script as an inspiration, as a source to be imitated with the brush. And so I wonder if you can speak to the
actually,
fluidity.
Guolong is the expert on that, because in what we call modern China, when in late Qing, when people like Guolong became more and more interested in ancient script, and those people are all, besides being government officials, they are also scholars and calligraphers. So they purposefully imitate and modify and get their inspirations from bronze inscriptions and all sorts of ancient inscriptions they can lay their hands on and develop into a variety of styles, in contrast with the traditional way of modeling your hand on rubbings from famous calligraphers like Wang Xizhi, Zhao Mengfu. So it is a very, to this day, you just pick the kind of, I would pick the bronze inscriptions I like to model my hands on.
I see. Thanks. I wanted to have you say something. So, but thank you to both of our speakers. We will reconvene this is a short break, 10 minutes. Take a quick break at 3:20. We'll be back.